damn thing.
Hi guys, this is Taylor, and this is my beautiful assistant Danielle, who will also sometimes maybe be referred to as Sweet D, because we've been watching a lot of Always Sunny in Philadelphia lately.
And also because I'm super sweet.
Yeah. And we may be referencing it in other ways. So anyway, today we went and saw God's Not Dead. Spoiler alert.
God's not dead. But by the end of the movie, you're gonna
wish you were. Which nobody's ever made that clever joke before.
Not as well as we did.
Anyway, if you couldn't tell already, this is going to be a very stream of consciousness rambling rant, because this movie was worse than I thought it would be. Oh my god, it was worse. It was just, wow. I wanted to download this thing because I knew just from like the trailer and what people were saying on Facebook that it was going to be awful, but it far exceeded my expectations. Far exceeded, which, yes. In that regard,
you were much worse than we thought you would be. God's Not Dead.
So this is also going to include spoilers. My head's a little... It's so shiny. Damn that light that's above me. It must be God. God's trying to get me because I'm an atheist.
No, it's actually God has blessed this.
Speaking of which,
video.
She's a Christian. So,
well, he's an atheist, which I'm sure, I don't think you guys knew.
And you know,
surprise,
atheists and Christians don't go well together.
Which is
what you would know if you had seen God's Not Dead, because the professor actually has a Christian girlfriend, and
she was unequally yoked, so she had to break up with him. Also, because he was.
So, spoiler alert. There's going to be spoilers, a lot of them.
Spoiler alert, there will be spoilers.
And it's like I used to say with the Passion of the Christ. Spoiler alert, he dies at the end. And so, spoiler alert, basically the, you know, humble, good Christian college student, who's a freshman, by the way. A freaking freshman, shows up this evil atheist professor by the end of it. And although I'm sure everybody expects that already based on the premise of the movie,
it was so much worse than you think it was
a lot more spoilers. Like I was saying, it is a lot worse than you expected it to be.
Like, we went in knowing it was going to be bad.
My expectations were kind of like here, but they just went straight through the floorboards. Like, you can't even see them
anymore because they're so far down. Well, in Rotten Tomatoes, when we looked this last night, Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave it a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the viewers
deserved lower than a 13%.
But the viewers gave it an 86%. Which tells you a lot about the people who were going to the movie and are reviewing it.
Well, and Yahoo Movies also had a lot of, like, 4-star reviews and 5-star ones. And I think that's because, obviously, the Christian evangelicals who were so gung-ho about this movie wound up, you know, spamming those sites with a lot of those positive reviews. Speaking of that demographic,
we live in a fairly conservative area of the country.
Texas.
And we went to the movie in a small suburban town near a major city, which... in this town tends to be an affluent-ish.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of diversity in the movie theater.
It would not surprise one who came to this area that there were lots of evangelical Christians in this area of Texas.
One would not be surprised. So one would also not be surprised if you show up to the movie to see God's Not Dead and you're the only person who's not an evangelical Christian.
As a matter of fact, I even wore my atheist t-shirt
on the back
to the theater.
Has the quote from Madeline Murray O'Hare.
Yep.
Which I said, please wear that one. Even though I'm a Christian.
Yeah, so... I wanted to see this, I wanted to download it, like a torrent or stream it or something, just any way not to pay for it, because I could already tell from the trailer and some of the comments people were posting on Facebook that it was going to be god-awful. Yes, I had to throw that in there. But it was way more god-awful than we were expecting.
It was so bad.
We did wind up seeing it in a theater and paying for it, which, you know, I guess it's the good Christian thing to do.
It is. So. That's why there are torrents.
We got shushed in the theater. Shushed. By some woman and her 2 children.
Wait, hang on.
I think she was the mother.
Guess what color she was?
White.
Yes! Oh my god, you're so good at this game. Guess what color the rest of... yeah, and her child, I think it was her daughter. And then when we walked out afterward, because I could tell, I knew they were unhappy with us. Because, and let's maybe back up to where...
Yeah, there were other people talking in the theater.
And one of the reasons I think
they were laughing
that we would have preferred to torrent, or he would because he has no morals because he's an atheist.
I do. That's true.
Would have preferred to torrent it is because we wanted to be able to kind of, you know, express freely.
Yeah.
Our reactions
to the movie. If they can voice their emotions, why can't we?
But knowing that we were going to be in a theater with people who were most likely not there to give it an thorough review, but were there...
I should just wear a hat.
Well, atheists, you know how atheists are. They wear
It's
hats.
God trying to get me. Did I already make that joke?
Not in this
Who
one.
cares?
Right. And I was saying that it's not. It's actually God blessing this review. So this is God approved. So
God approves of atheists. That was the message that we should have got from God's Not Dead. Because by the end of it, we've already said there's going to be spoilers. So by the end of it, the professor dies. It's not just that they fucking convert him.
No.
He dies. He gets hit by a fucking car, which to me just
seems
like the biggest stereotype for how an atheist is going to die.
Also, did you notice that the car drove away? So
it's
obviously
like
that was
something out of a Jack Chick track.
It was. That is the perfect description.
It really is. Like the whole movie was like a Jack Chick track.
Yes, and it was just as boring. The acting was, oh dear God, it hurt my soul. The acting hurt. There was you couldn't, and it was like the girlfriend. If she's a Christian, right, and she wears a cross, so she's a good guy. So she's like telling her boyfriend, who was this freshman who did this, debating with the evil, awful atheist professor who deserved to go to hell and died. She told him in the beginning if he chose to do this that she was out, right? She was going to break up with him. Well, it's like there was never any build up to there was never any reason to most of the characters' actions.
It's like this, she was, I feel like with evangelicals and with a lot of conservative Christians, they have like this stereotype of the, pretend Christian.
In fact, I made notes about the roles of the women in the movie. You didn't necessarily see many. There were either adorable conflicted co-eds that, of course, in the end come around to accept Jesus. There was the angry atheist. She also was. She was a lot of things. She was like all the bad things that evangelicals think all mashed up into one character. She was a animal rights activist, a liberal. I'm sure she was pro-choice, although I don't think she ever said anything about. She probably ate babies for dinner, I'm sure. What else was she besides that? Just angry. She was rude.
I also got the impression that a lot of the characters in the movie were supposed to. There's this whole thing that you hear from like some Christians about, people who are not Christian try to fill their lives with other things. Like in Always Sunny, Dennis talks about his God hole. And so in God's Not Dead, they had like different characters who were non-Christians that tried to fill their God hole with something else. There's a guy who's like wealthy and successful and everything.
Oh my God!
His relationship is on the rocks and it falls apart. Well, and
he's the girlfriend of he's the boyfriend of the girlfriend who was the PETA activist, liberal, who gets cancer. And of course, I mean, it wasn't subtle at all. There's no subtlety. No. It wasn't like he was kind of an asshole to her. Like she says, he's
not
like,
subtle is what this movie should have been titled.
Our screenwriters suck also and should die. It was like he's like, I made partner, and she goes, I have cancer, and he's all, welp, I'm out, literally, and stood up and walked out of the restaurant.
All right, tapping out, babe. I'm out of here.
Just no exaggeration.
Nope.
And that's how that was the thing.
And the thing that bothered me was the people in the theater reacted like, oh my gosh, I can't
like, of course he did. That. No, they could. They were like, See,
but that's not the impression I got. I got that they were like surprised by that. Like,
well, yeah, but they expected it. Like,
I mean, it was something they probably expected because anybody who doesn't have Jesus in their life.
Exactly.
But at the same time, there was like maybe it was this false sense of surprise that they expressed, but. It just it was very disingenuous. Crazy. But I also kind of got the impression that the girl I should have looked up the names of these people because I didn't pay attention. No, the Shane Harper's girlfriend in the movie.
The
blonde, yeah,
the angry bitter one.
Yes,
yes,
whatever her name
Women
is.
had supporting roles.
We'll just call her angry bitter girlfriend.
Ex-girlfriend.
Because with freshman students, that's all. Apparently, for this freshman boy, he's able to have an intelligent mind and he's got control of his emotions. But his girlfriend just completely batshit crazy off the wall.
Batshit crazy. In fact, she was like, "If you do this, I'm out, right? And I'm quitting you." Then she quits him, and she's all, "I can't believe you're doing this." And it's like, was she?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I got the impression that her sort of stereotype was the person who fills that God hole with relationships, even though she pretends she's a Christian.
Oh, gotcha. So then, I forgot what I was gonna say. About the women in
There's so much to cover in this movie. We're gonna forget sometimes and take a minute to realign ourselves
because
on the track.
So bad.
They crammed all the worst. ridiculous Christian evangelical ideas they could into
I walked out and I told Taylor, I said, I'm embarrassed to be... Well, I think it was louder than that. Yeah. Oh my God! Like that, you know. I'm embarrassed to be aligned, even just to identify as a Christian after I saw this movie. And the thing that I told him that upset me the most...
It made me, as a former Christian, even, like that tiny sliver, like when some Christians tell me, oh, I think you're still a Christian, and by the end of your life, God's going to take you to heaven anyway.
Well, because they know better than you do.
That tiny sliver of me that's, you know, fake atheist Taylor, is just, it hurt during this movie.
It does. It's painful. It's a hateful, racist, bigoted piece of trash.
Yeah, I mean, I expected the anti-atheist stuff, but they went after
and the simplistic stuff.
Not Mormons. They went after Muslims in it. They went after
there was an Asian
Chinese
family that it was all very like he was like this. Of course, he was brilliant, and he did all this extra work because Asians. And
did I get that he spoke in a little broken English too?
Yeah, he called the kids. The kid's name in the movie was Josh, and when he introduced himself, he goes, "Oh, hello, Mr. Josh." And you're like, "Oh my God, did that just happen? That just happened?" And everybody's like, "Aw," because then he made some comment about how Mr. Josh was really thinking.
It's like the stuff you would expect on South Park. You know, the characters say, "Hello,
it was so bad. It was so bad. It was almost satire." And then there was the Muslim girl who, you know, almost basically, I mean, she gets thrown out of her house, and there's slapping and beating. She's beaten because she's discovered. However, because she's discovered to be
I have to say this part, because this part just it shocked me. They're so inconsistent in this movie, because at one moment you think that this, you know, Muslim father is just this horrible person who's sheltering his daughter, and then the next minute he's turning around and saying, "I'm only doing this because I love you."
And he was very kind.
I know how
and
difficult things are for us living here.
I said, "I'm so glad they did that," because
it
they
seemed
made
like
him
they took
really
a turn
warm.
for, you know, the better and
And
threw
I thought,
off
well, at least
people's
there's one
expectations.
yes.
Then no, he slaps her across the face
a bunch of
times.
At least
twice.
And there was there was even hair dragging. Remember, he grabbed her by the hair and dragged her down the stairs and threw her out of the house. And she's like, "No!"
But we have to clarify why this was. She was listening to. Are you ready? Ready? An MP3 of a Franklin Graham sermon.
Dun, dun, dun. So apparently, God is not dead. However, there's a very specific God that is alive, and it is not Allah, and it is not.
And if you listen to Franklin Graham, children who are not Christians, just
your dad's
be prepared
gonna smack you
that
around
in any
and
minute your parents are going to come in and just come down with you on you with the wrath of God, for lack of a better word.
Also, communism is bad. I got that message with the Asian family that appeared. I think they were from China. Oh, in fact, he said that. That's right. Because the white kids were really clueless. And he like hands her his card, and she's like, "What's PRC?" And he said, People's Republic of China." And she's like, "Oh, really?" Like, it was just this whole weird. The whole thing was so weird.
It was. Maybe we'll edit that out. Maybe not. But, you know, I kept thinking before we saw this movie, and even during the movie, South Park did this bit with the Passion of the Christ where the boys went and asked for their money back from the movie theater because they said it was like just a 2-hour torture porn and stuff. And of course I didn't do that because, hey, I love torture. Torture's entertaining to me. But with this movie, maybe I should have. At first, before we saw it, I thought, nah, I'm probably just going to let it slide because I really thought it would be like, you know, a fireproof Kirk Cameron type of thing. It was worse than that. It was not just like a Christian parable or something like that in the movie. It was like all the most horrible things that you could, like, imagine Ted Haggard before he was outed as a homosexual, meth-using, you know, person.
I think prostitute
maybe mixed in with Ray Comfort's terrible apologetics.
Yes.
Throw in some moral majority era Christian nationalism crap.
And white people.
That's pretty much what the movie is. It just hits that note over and over and over and over again until it kills off everybody who's not a Christian in the movie.
And then by the end, the saddest part to me was that people like clapped and wooed.
Yeah.
After all this bigotry and this hatred and
I
this
booed
anger.
at the end of the movie. I had to. It's just, I had said some things, you know, I think we already mentioned we were talking during the movie and stuff, and we got shushed.
And then she
but
went to
other people were talking during it and making
riled.
noise too. And I feel like with these sorts of movies, they're so controversial enough. And okay, by the end of the movie, they invite you to text all your friends with your phone the message "God's not dead." So it's begging for conversation. It's begging you talk about this movie.
I would actually say it was begging one to go on a monologue. There was no dialogue invited.
Actually, that's a perfect example or a perfect understanding for the whole movie. The whole thing is just they don't care about the other side. They just want to portray them in a very pigeonholed, narrow-minded way.
I actually, as a Christian, I never even knew people thought this about atheists. But apparently a lot of people believe...
Amazingly, she didn't. Which is partly why I took her to see the movie.
But people, apparently, you're an atheist if you've had a traumatic experience... Your parent dying.
You better believe they hit that stereotype.
I
How they could have avoided it,
I didn't even know this
surprised.
existed, but I guess and Taylor said this is what happens to him all the time, and I was like, I'm so sorry on behalf of all Christians.
The student even asks in the movie, "What happened to you?" Which atheist, in my experience, and I'm sure lots of people here on YouTube will agree with me, happens all the time.
I am so sorry. I had no idea, and I'm so sorry. Because I assumed, wrongly, apparently, that atheists come to the conclusion that there is no God because they studied scripture or in other books, and they couldn't, make it fit with their rational, logical thinking because it contradicted itself, and so therefore they came to a logical, scientific conclusion that there was no God.
In the defense of certain people who aren't like this movie gets no benefit of a doubt. But some people, I think, for them, it's because they had a very emotional, moving experience that drove them into the faith that they think only such a thing can drive them out of it. And that's a little understandable, but it all depends on where the person's coming from. And of course,
as you would imagine, so every atheist that's featured is this, had this experience where the reason they were atheists is because they were turned away from God because God hurt a loved one or didn't answer a prayer. There was
no one in the movie who is an atheist just because they disagree.
Right, none. It was all because they, at heart, they were still believers. They were just mad at God. They weren't really true. They weren't even atheists. They were just believers who were pissed off at God, who went out to go make everybody else. I mean, the foundation of the movie was ridiculous. Like, you walk into your freshman class, and there's no professor on earth that would make every single...
Finish your thought.
I can't even. I want you to take over.
We have to talk about the fact that this movie, the whole thing is premised on this ridiculous chain letter that was, propagated around the internets, in places like MySpace and Facebook. I remember seeing it mostly on MySpace, but I imagine it was on, AltNet and some of those other places. I don't know, back in the day. It seems like it's been around for a while, maybe even before the internet. I'm not for sure. But it's this whole thing about the, humble Christian student showing up the atheist professor who just challenges his beliefs. And it's
in my memory, it's always like a ex-military, like it's like a veteran who's in the class. Yes, because then you get even more glurge. If it's a military student,
I don't think I've heard that one. Like the two ones that I've heard that are most well known is there's one on the problem of evil where the kid basically says, well, maybe evil is just the absence of good. And, he compares it to, how cold is the absence of heat and thinks completely understanding physics in the worst possible way. And then there's another one. There's another one where the atheist professor challenges his students. If I drop this piece of chalk and it breaks, then that shows that God doesn't exist. Yeah. But if it doesn't break, then he does.
Then I'll believe in God.
And it always breaks until at last this student says some smart ass Christian thing, and then he drops it. And the thing that always killed me about this one was it rolls down his pant leg off his shoe and then stays in one piece.
And everybody
I'm just God. Well, that's simple physics.
That's the movie.
Divine
that's the whole movie. Imagine that one glurge email that was forwarded to you in a spam email from your aunt who doesn't know any better. Imagine that put into a 2-hour movie.
It really is that. But the thing that surprised me about it, and
I'm traumatized. I have PTSD from it.
The thing that drove me craziest about it was I expected going into this, because they show a little bit of what the kid talks about. But the thing is, I never would have guessed how completely devoid of arguments this movie is. I thought that it was going to be like, you know, some of the weakest apologetics, but it's barely even apologetics. The funniest thing, I laughed out loud when I saw it during the opening credits. It said apologetics research by this guy Rice Brooks, and Rice Brooks has written a book called God's Not Dead that has the same crap.
He's surely alive. So, he's living on the inside.
And there's a Newsboys song and album.
Dead. Imagine this the whole time. He's surely alive. He's like a score in the background. There's always Newsboys everywhere. Newsboys. Hi, Newsboys.
There is. Newsboys. This movie is like an advertisement for that apologetics book and for Newsboys, because Newsboys.
You think they make it? It says even says like they make a cameo.
They make a cameo, but. Then there's Newsboys on a poster.
And
from the very first opening scene.
Very first!
Scene 1!
Yeah.
He's wearing a Newsboys t-shirt.
Newsboys t-shirt, Newsboys poster.
I feel like there's like Newsboys coffee cups in the movie.
Oh my god, there probably were.
Newsboys notepads.
But only used by the good people. The bad people get dead. Remember, they get hit by cars who run off.
And then, okay, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, there's one big fucking Newsboys concert that everybody goes to. All the Christians just instinctively, like...
herded. Like cattle.
In 1984 or something, just like zombies,
it's
walk
true.
into the Christian Christian music, auditorium and just listen to Newsboys.
And you know what? God is so awesome. This is how live God is that because of these zombie Christians that were being herded to this giant center where the Newsboys were going to play, this pastor who was this whole side story that didn't need to happen. Ever.
Yeah.
Remember him? Do you remember him with the black friend?
There
was a black guy in it.
The pastor was only there to take I guess, confession from the atheist professor at the end of his life.
God is so alive that he set it up so that the angry atheist professor, which was played by Kevin Sorbo, Hercules, was running to the Newsboys concert because reasons and girlfriend and God. He's like, suddenly I've been angry so long, and he starts running. He's running. Of course, it starts to rain. Suddenly, he's on the corner. It starts to rain, and the black friend, there was a black friend of the priest, of the pastor, who was the side story, who didn't belong, who didn't need anything. He's like, it's going to rain later, and the white guy's like, what? He's like, yes. And he says, well, you're always so cryptic or something. So then at the end, whenever anyway, it starts raining out of nowhere. Kevin Sorbo dashes across the street, gets hit by a car, and he's lying there, he's going, oh! And so this may have been my favorite part. The Haitian guy puts his hands on his chest like this, and he goes, he has blood he's filling up his lungs, and his ribs are smashed. Because smashed apparently is like God told him that.
Did I miss the part in the movie where they said that this Haitian guy or whatever is like a doctor? Because I don't.
No, that was from God. Remember, that was like he just touched him and he could.
So it was like a divine message beamed to his head,
much like the Newsboys with Cancer Girl.
Right.
And the divine message that...
Yeah, both of us listened to the Newsboys growing up and DC Talk as well.
I still listen to them. I'm an unashamed listener of K-Love and Air One. Shoot me. Oh, well, you probably want to, but don't.
It's a shame. It really is. But anyways, I didn't even... that they would attach their name to a movie like this.
I was real disappointed.
It's surprising, really. Because it really is like we were talking throughout the whole movie quietly to ourselves. Imagine why we got shushed. But we were talking throughout the whole movie.
We were discreet. It was like this.
It was written by a 10-year-old.
It really was.
It was written by Kirk
I even
Cameron.
said I have a 10-year-old, and I said to Taylor, I said my 10-year-old's name. I said he would be able to argue against this guy, and I mean it was. I keep running out of words because there aren't any words to express how ridiculous this movie was.
And I was going to say that it was devoid of arguments except for maybe there was only one real argument that they discussed. The other two were really just things they just dismissed.
Yes.
They said, we're too good for this. Yeah. But the thing that they discussed
that's just silly.
And this is the part that drove me the craziest, was because from the previews and stuff, it looks like this kid's making his case for the existence of God. Is that not what the whole premise of the movie is supposed to be? And they say at the very beginning that this kid...
No, you forgot it was a Newsboys ad.
It was a Newsboys ad. Yeah, basically. The whole movie. But at the very beginning, this kid is told by the professor that he's going to have the last 20 minutes of each of the first 3 classes to present his case for the existence of God.
Because if you were in his class, a philosophy class, not a religion class, not a...
Yeah, we did really terribly starting this video. We should have just explained
I don't know.
some of what... I mean, people I think already know what the premise is.
Well, but he made each student write out of... the kid guessed the really hated
He made the students
made each student write God is dead with their names, and then, or else they would have to defend this, because apparently that's how this... I mean, no, that would never happen on any planet.
And the thing that drove me the craziest is that this atheist professor, when this Shane Harper kid, you know, I'm just going to call him the actor's name because I don't know his name, and his name really doesn't even matter because he's just Christian prop number 1.
Totally.
But throughout the whole movie, this professor just does not let this kid go.
He even assaults the kid in the hallway. He's like, "You're not going to do this to me."
Pins him up against the
wall.
wall.
You will not ruin my... And it was like, whoa, that dude is angry.
This is literally like a crazy ass evangelical Christian's wet dream.
Yes.
It's just
perfect.
Oh my gosh.
Perfect example.
I knew from the previews that's what it would be, but
and of course he treated his girlfriend like shit. I
expected there to be more arguments than this, though, because, like I said, he had those 20 minutes at the end of the first 3 classes. That's 60 minutes to present his case, and all we're really given is like 5 to 10 minutes top, if that. And the worst part of it is the only thing he really addresses at all is a Stephen Hawking quote. Like a Stephen Hawking quote cherry-picked from, I think, the Grand Design. I'm not sure where they pulled it from or something. But it's basically Stephen Hawking's idea that the universe can create itself. That's how they summarize it. I really don't think that's what Hawking's getting at.
Like the love
that sounds
gravity.
Like a gross oversimplification.
Mm-hmm.
But then... the funny thing is they roll with this with like a John Lennox response and stuff. And if what they attacked was not a straw man, I can kind of see where they're coming from. Because the universe creating itself, yeah, there's some debatable issues on that, especially since I don't understand Stephen Hawking's science that he uses behind that. But then they go on to talk about Richard Dawkins, and guess what Richard Dawkins they critique? Who made God? I'm so sick of hearing that. That's like the one thing that all Christians, like apologists, seem to focus on is, but Dawkins would ask, who made God?
He's
who
like,
would ask
then
that?
Professor,
So
I would
stupid.
ask you. Who made, you know?
Yeah, well, his response to the Dawkins thing was that could only be asked of a created God. But I've always felt like that's not the point Dawkins is making. His point is that on particular arguments, like the first cause argument, if you say everything that exists must have a cause, and then you ask, well, then what was the cause of God? You're not literally asking, well, who created God? You're asking more like, well, your own argument defeats itself, because if there's something, God, that doesn't need a cause, then your argument just collapses, because there's not everything that needs a cause. But they just completely rolled over that one like it didn't matter. And then, of course, he sways.
Now, out of 80 students, he was the only one who refused to sign this God is dead and sign his name. Yeah. And all the others throughout the whole movie, the students in the class were fairly, patronizing toward him, especially in the beginning. Throughout then the arguments that he presented, the 1 minute at a time we got to see of the 20-minute arguments, they're kind of warming up, and you start to see them like nodding along and at the end.
I don't think we've said it in this. We've done several takes, and we're probably going to wind up doing several more. But I don't think we said it yet. But this movie's name really should have been God's Not Subtle, because oh my God, the whole thing, just one point after another, just rammed straight down your throat like crazy.
It's true, and you're like, they're not gonna do that, I hope, and then they did that. No, that's
I wanted to shout throughout the whole movie, oh, they did not just do that.
Oh, I know, and I wanted to say, oh, they did do that. No, they're not gonna, oh, they are. And like at the end, so he sways, of course, every student in the class. Not one person did not believe in God at the end of his beautiful, amazing, logical, rational swing arguments.
The best part, though, they stand up at the end,
and
then they say,
God is not dead.
Like fucking Spartacus.
For no reason. Or Dead Poets Society. Captain, my captain. It's like, you know, you just didn't.
It's
you didn't need
just
to do
so
that.
comical, and like by the end of the movie,
And everybody in the theater is like,
people,
"Woo!"
Yeah,
you know,
the people were clapping by the end of that movie. It just showed to me that there's no faith left to have in the movie industry. It's just all crap. It really is. It's just terrible. But the other thing I wanted to say about the arguments in it, I expected like some bad apologetics. Like I already mentioned Rice Brooks. I don't know actually what a lot of his apologetics
would have been nice.
Yeah.
There just weren't any.
I expected Pascal's wager. There wasn't even Pascal's wager. There really wasn't even the cosmological argument or the first cause or the teleological. There's just nothing. It was literally that Hawking quote, what Dawkins said, and then
a bunch of emotion.
Why
do you hate God, Professor?
Well, actually, now that I think of it, they did talk about the beginning of the universe, but that's such a... I mean, they didn't actually articulate an argument.
No,
all they said was,
right.
well, if the universe had a beginning, which is just like, okay, huge premise or huge assumption there. What's your support for it? They just never give support for it.
It was just the universe created. God. And, oh, no, he did have a support for it, remember? It was Genesis 1.
Oh, God.
Swear to God. Swear. That was his support.
Yeah,
He goes, but here's the proof. And he puts it, because he's talking about how life was formed. And he's like, and then da-da-da. And he said, and so-and-so will say, I think that's when he brought in Darwin, and said, Darwin postulated, and he didn't even use the word postulated.
They actually quoted fucking Lee Strobel. Lee Strobel. Up until this point, they're doing, Stephen Hawking, who's a very famous scientist, John Lennox, who's a mathematician, and I think he's a scientist too, Richard Dawkins, who again is a scientist. He talked about Aristotle, and then out of the blue, Lee Strobel, a fucking journalist who's not even a very good journalist, because in The Case for Christ, he just interviews evangelical Christians, and that's all this movie was. It's like Lee Strobel made a movie. I could just keep coming up with all these terrible analogies for what the movie is.
And he would be right on every point.
Yeah. It's like, imagine all the worst Christian tropes you've ever heard ground up into this evil, nasty, ridiculous, disgusting stew.
And I think what scared me the most was just that people ate the stew and liked the stew.
They did. I half expected that, but I really did not expect as many people to like it as they did.
Especially the wooing and yelling and clapping. There was applause.
There were like, it wasn't that full of a theater. It was like, what, 30 to 40 people or something. But
quarter full.
We could tell. We could tell instantly we were the only people in there who were actually not liking the film, not loving the film, not wanting to make,
babies
sweet,
with the
sweet
film.
love to the film.
I did want to make babies with the film and then take them into the back alley and abort them and eat them for dinner. That's how much I hated the film. Was that too much?
No,
okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
You might get lots of Christians commenting a bit. Oh my gosh, how could she be a Christian?
It's because I'm unequally yoked.
Pro-life, pro-choice. But I called you pro-life for a second. That's funny because her sister is.
It's just mean.
I love you.
It's just mean.
I love you. We really thought it was going to actually take an anti-abortion direction at one point. But then it turned out that one of the atheist characters just had cancer.
Died.
Which is much better than just being against abortion.
Getting a hit and run by a car, and then at the course of the last minute, he gasps out.
And the funny thing is, the movie kept hitting this theme of suffering over and over again. And they even... Actually, that was one of the arguments that they tackled. But I don't even remember what he said against it. Because he tackled, like, the argument from evil. But I think the gist of what he said... Because it turns out...
Sometimes the answer is no.
Yeah. It turns out that the professor is angry at God because his mother died.
When the professor was 12.
Yeah.
His mother died.
Yeah.
And he prayed that God would save him, save his mom, over and over. And he's like, of course, this comes out in the middle of the last 20-minute presentation that the kid has to offer in front of the class. So, of course, you see this atheist professor who we've seen as this horrible, terrible person all the way through, who... the kid is like in his face, why do you hate God? Of course, there's this huge emotional response from the professor. Because he killed my mother! And you're like, oh, that just happened.
Did you mention that the kid asked like 10 times?
Right in his face, and you could see, and he's getting all...
Why do you hate God? Why do you hate God?
I don't!
Why do you hate God?
And he's like, oh, because he killed my mother! And then he's like, if you were a... And then he keeps going. Like, any self-respecting atheist or person would have shut their mouths, because they would have realized, oops, and then let's call it a day. But no, apparently atheists are also really stupid. Because he kept digging himself deeper into his hole. He's talking about how he had prayed to God so many times for him to save God. He would even worship him for the rest of his life. He saved his mother, but alas. And he said, so God didn't answer my prayers, so therefore I knew there was no God. Well, guess what the kid says? Remember? He did answer. His answer was no. Yeah, that happened. You must have, like, zoned out.
His answer was no?
No, he wasn't going to save his mom. God did answer your prayer. His answer was no. But your mom's not going to
I don't remember that specifically. I remember him saying
happened.
Sometimes the answer is no.
It happened a couple times. He directly said that.
Wow. But anyway, this movie hits a theme of suffering over and over again. And I've heard lots of Christians say...
Except for the rich guy who lived in the cell of sin, but with the devil. Remember that guy?
Yeah, but then you kind of get the implication there that he's suffering but just doesn't know it or something.
Oh, no,
which to me is just kind of like...
Because he even said...
Who cares?
He even said, I'm a horrible person.
If you don't know you're suffering.
No, because he was even like, I'm a horrible person. And you're like, what? You know...
Yeah,
the characters were... The writing was so inconsistent. The characters were inconsistent. There was nothing to point to this. This guy didn't give a shit. Then all of a sudden he's like, I'm a terrible person. No, you didn't think that before this.
Everybody in the movie, like even the Christians, were just caricatures. That's all they were, and it just...
It was, like you said earlier, it was a chick tract come to life.
It literally was a chick tract, and that MySpace email thing, or letter or whatever, just stretched into like a... What? Like it was like a 2-hour movie.
It was forever.
2 hours of nonsense.
No, it wasn't. It was like purgatory long. It was like forever.
It's like we were trapped in
a
cell of sin.
We were by the devil.
Although the sin was the movie, not us.
That's true. We were pure and clean. Even though we got shushed.
I forgot what else we were going to talk about.
I think I've covered all my copious notes. I talked about the women's... It really bugged me that there was not a woman in the movie who was that had a redemptive part. There was no female that...
The only thing... Well, this is the thing that hit me, which is... You know, there's that Bible verse. I can't remember which one. And then what was I
expecting? This to be like a feminist film?
Christ is the head of man and man is the head of woman. But it just, like, the whole thing with women in the movie kind of just struck me. Like, the only thing redeeming about them...
was if they accepted Jesus.
Is if they're Christian.
And then they were adorbs.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they were just shrew harpies. Like the
Although
atheist,
I don't know, maybe even the same could have been said of the men in the movie. It was just generally,
it's true.
If your caricature accepts Jesus, it makes everything okay.
But no, because remember the professor died. The girls all got saved because they're just fragile women who can't have anything bad happen to them, except for the one that was Muslim, and she deserved it because she was Muslim.
Do we have anything else we want to say about this piece of shit movie? I don't know.
I love you.
I love you. Oh, man.
It was sad.
It was. There was...
It was a real downer, man.
We were laughing a lot at it up until the point where the Muslim girl gets hit by her father.
Then it was just...
And then it just took a turn for, like,
racist,
pathetic,
garbage,
disturbing...
bigoted, hateful,
nonsense.
Nasty. It was very small-minded. It was sad. It was very sad.
And the thing that surprises me a little bit is I knew all that going into it. I just didn't realize, like, exactly what notes they were going to hit with it. And they just hit, like, as many horrible, horrible ones as they could.
It's true. You know how we know this review is over? Because I'm on a Diet Coke.
Well, there you go. You're adorbs.
You're adorbs.
That's all.